Welcome back to the Daily Lift. Have you ever heard of or have been diagnosed with shiny object syndrome? If you're like me, you've been sick with this a time or two in your life. And so often in this life, we get distracted by those flashy things that don't really matter. And we end up spinning our wheels and jumping from project to project or job to job or passion to passion without really getting much accomplished. And it is so easy for this to happen in our lives, to focus on the temporary and not keep our attention on those permanent things that are the true main points. And the job is, as Stephen Covey says, to keep the main thing the main thing. And as Christians, we are really called to look beyond this life, beyond these distractions, and fix our eyes on eternity. And we have in Colossians chapter 3, verse 2, Paul says that we are to set our minds on things above, not on things of this earth. And easier said than done, right? Oftentimes we know these passages, we know that we are to keep our eyes on the prize, but then we see the storms of life, we see the waves crashing around us like Peter, and we start to sink. And how do we keep ourselves walking on that water? How do we keep ourselves keeping our eyes on those main things? Well, we need to focus on those important things to store up those spiritual treasures. We need to be focusing on God's kingdom. We need to be focused on spiritual growth and all of those things that will not be moth-eaten or corroded or be able to be stolen. And these earthly distractions like success, like wealth, and even the daily stresses in our lives can easily pull us away from our eternal purpose. And so what are we to do? Well, first off, we need to compare these earthly things to the eternal things. Jesus says to store up our treasures in heaven. Jesus says that even Solomon, in all of the wonderful clothes and the splendid attire that he wore, was not like the beauty of the flowers, which today are beautiful and tomorrow will be withered away. As the grass withers and the flower fades, the word of the Lord endures forever. So we need to remember that there are things that are fleeting in this world and that there are things that are eternal. And when we get distracted by those shiny objects, we need to ask ourselves, in a year, will those things matter? Am I really trying to do this for the Lord, or am I getting pulled off track? So we need to align ourselves with God's eternal purpose, which gives us perspective on those things that really matter. When we stay in the Word, when we stay talking about spiritual things, this keeps us from getting distracted by all those flashy, shiny objects out there. And Martha and Mary, Martha had this problem as well. In Luke chapter 10, we see that Martha was busying about as Jesus was there teaching. She was cooking and cleaning and doing all these things and being hospitable. And she was getting frustrated by Mary because Mary wasn't helping at all. She was just sitting down listening to Jesus. And Martha goes to Jesus and says, "Help me," because Mary isn't helping at all. Can you tell her to help? And Jesus responds by saying, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and troubled about so many things, but one thing is needed, and Mary has chosen that good part, which will not be taken away from her." And so even though these good things that Martha was occupied with, she was serving and being hospitable, it was not the main thing. She was majoring in those minors, and we have to make sure that we keep the main thing the main thing. And that's what Jesus is saying here, that Mary chose the main thing, and this will not be taken away from her because she was storing up those spiritual treasures. And so I want to encourage you today to reflect on your own life. Are you being as focused on eternal things, or are you being distracted by the temporary? And today, make sure that you are being intentional with the things that you're doing, being purposeful, so that we are setting our minds on things above and keeping those main things the main things. Because oftentimes we can get distracted by all of this life, and we need to make sure that we are not getting distracted. So I wanted you to share with me, what are some things that has been distracting you lately, and how are you going to make sure that they are not distractions? Share below in the comments. And as always, remember who you work for, because no matter who we're working for and what we're doing, we are always working for the Lord. Remember to keep the main thing the main thing, and as always, go lift somebody up today.